So Jesus tells a story. So we pick it up in Luke chapter 10, verse 30. Here's what Jesus says. In reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. Now, I don't know if you ever noticed that. He passed by on the other side. Which means, here's a guy laying here, okay, half beaten, half dead. He doesn't walk up and go, oh, no, here's what he does. He walks by on the other side. He goes completely out of the way because he doesn't even want to be near this guy, right? Let's go on. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan. I thought he was the good Samaritan. He ain't the good Samaritan yet. He's just a guy. He's a Samaritan. Okay? As he traveled, came where the man was. When he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Okay, so we know the story, right? We know what happened. But then what did Jesus say after he told the story? Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell at the hands of the robbers? See, because this story has been passed down from generation to generation, we've kind of made it out to say just what we wanted to say. So if you remember a couple weeks ago when we talked about theology, good theology is who God is, what God is doing in the world based on what he says about himself. So I want to break that story down today to fully understand what Jesus said. It's not what we think. It's what Jesus said. So Jesus is talking here to a Jewish audience. Obviously, these religious leaders were Jewish leaders. And so he says, here's the story. Here's a Jewish man. He's one of your own, right? He's going from Jerusalem to Jericho. He's on his way. This is days before there were police forces and security cameras, and this was kind of a dangerous road. And so what is it? He's beaten, he's robbed, he's left for dead. And it says, along came what? 2 Jewish experts. He's talking to Jews. He's saying, this guy is a Jew. And along comes 2 Jewish, 2 Jewish men. And what do? They pass by. They see him, but they keep on walking. Why? Well, there's been explanations. Some have said that the road was obviously very dangerous, so if they would have helped, they too very well could have been attacked themselves. So maybe they didn't want to get involved. Others have said, well, they were Jewish religious leaders, and if they had gotten involved, they might have become unclean, and you couldn't go into the temple if you were unclean. And others have said they were just 2 heartless jerks. Now you go ahead and take it however you want it, right? But here's the one thing: we don't really know. We don't know why they passed by. All Jesus said was that they just kept on going. So what he explains here is their motivation. Their motivation was not where it needed to be. So enter a Samaritan. Now, this is one of the pieces that loses its sting 2,000 years later. You see, what you may not know is that Jews and Samaritans had a real hatred for each other. See, when they started allowing non-Jew, or when started allowing Jews to intermarry, with people of a different race or a different nationality or a different religious background, they hate. It was a culture that was full of hatred. The Jews looked at Samaritans as these bunch of half-breeds. That's how they looked at them. right? They saw them as the lowest of the low. They didn't care a bit about them. And this is not just some friendly rivalry here. This is a hatred that they had. So in John chapter 4, verse 4, when it says that Jesus and his disciples, remember this? It says they had to pass through Samaria. You know they didn't have to pass through Samaria. They could have done what any Jew does. They could have walked around, right? See, here's Judah and here's Galilee, right? And in the middle is Samaria. So what most Jews would do is rather than go straight down, they would go around, right? So when it says Jesus had to pass through Samaria, why? Because he was on a mission. He was on God's mission. He was on God's timetable here. And so for us, because you probably never met a Samaritan, right? Much less hated one, we have to think through the lens of who is the person that you disagree with most. What type of person really gets under your skin? What type of person really bothers you? Maybe today it would be like Jesus telling the parable of the good Democrat or the good Republican. You pick one, okay? Maybe it was, Jesus telling the parable about the white man and the black man. Or maybe it was Jesus telling a parable about someone in this religion and someone in this religion. See, Jesus doesn't qualify who the Samaritan is. He doesn't say he was a Christian. He doesn't say he was a nice guy. All it says was a Samaritan. It doesn't say that the Samaritan was good. It doesn't say that the Samaritan was nice. It doesn't say that the Samaritan was a Christian. It just says he was a Samaritan. That's who Jesus makes the hero of the story. So what does he do? Okay? Number one, he stops. Okay? Write that down. He stops. He was on his way somewhere. He had places to go, people to see, and things to do. He had in his GPS the coordinates that would get him to the place where he was going the fastest, and so he was on his way somewhere. We're on our way somewhere. We have reason to be there. We have a time schedule to follow, right? And so sometimes it takes us out of that realm of really seeing people the way we need to see people. Here's the second thing. He became vulnerable. Now think about it. If a guy's laying on the ground and you're going to go and you're going to help him, you're going to bandage his wounds, how do you do that? You get down on his level. You're probably down on your hands and knees. You're bandaging this guy. You're taking care of him. He was very vulnerable. Yes, they could have jumped out and beat him too. They could have jumped out and robbed him too. But he became vulnerable to the point that he was willing to put himself at risk to address this injured man. And then what does he do? He puts him on his animal, right? He takes him to the inn. Okay? And then, number 3, he made a massive investment to someone he didn't know, to someone that he didn't know that would ever pay him back, to someone he never expected to get anything in return. As Tim Keller calls it, he says, getting sacrificially involved. So the answer to the lawyer's question, who is my neighbor? Jesus simply says this in this story, is the person who needs your help. And Jesus doesn't shrink it. He doesn't qualify it. Jesus says your neighbor is not just someone that you like, not just someone that you get along with. Your neighbor is the person that needs your help. But we've shrunk it in our society. And we like to substitute the word neighbor for brother and sister, right? Hey, I'm totally cool with taking a risk for my brother, my sister, right? I like them. We get along. We hang out. We agree on stuff. We go to church together. I could totally take a risk for him or for her. And Jesus says, well, everyone is not your brother or your sister in Christ, in faith. Everyone is your neighbor. Yes, that means all 8 billion of them. It's talking about people that you have met and the people whom you haven't met. People who are close to you and people who are far away from you. People that you agree with and people that you disagree with. And so if our compassion is to reflect Jesus, it seems to me to be the case that our responsibility is to reach out and help, period, wherever we see a need. To say the least, it should leave us a little uncomfortable. What a massive challenge this is. I don't know how you'll walk out of here today without feeling challenged in this way. You see, the poor that I see, we say, well, they're not needy, right? I mean, we live in America. I mean, we have government institutions that are supposed to help people in need. You know, there are jobs out there. Surely, you know, they can go get a job, you know, or we read about a report where someone has abused the system, or someone has worked the system, or someone has fooled us, right? So I don't know who I should help. I don't even know. And the question is, did Jesus wait until every single one of us was completely destitute? Did Jesus wait till all of us were at rock bottom, we had nothing left before he stepped in to help us? If there's a need, and if we can help, and if our compassion reflects Jesus' compassion, then we can do something. We can't do everything. We can do something. I remember in 2010, we were sitting in the airport. There was about 10 of us, and we were on our way to Haiti, right? We were doing a missions trip to Haiti for a week, right? And a guy in the airport started talking to one of our people, and he asked a question. He said, what do you think you can do in a week? You're going to go down there for a week, and then you're going to come back home. What do you think you can do in a week? You know what Jesus said? Jesus said, if you just give someone a cup of water, right? It didn't qualify how long, how much. He just said, if you can do something, do something. Now, we may phrase it like this. You know, I would love to step in right now and help, but I just can't. I can't without giving up something. And I certainly don't want to be taken advantage of. And I certainly don't want to deprive my family. And listen, no one is asking you to. No one is asking you to do that. Here's what we're really saying. I'd be more compassionate if I had more money and resources. You ever heard anybody say, you know, if I win the lottery, I'll give God 10%. Well, that's easy, you know, if you win $350 million, right? But what about now? What about with what I have now? You know, are we looking at it in that way? I'd be more compassionate if I had more resources. So let me break that myth down. It's always going to hurt. It's always going to cost something. That's what giving sacrificially is all about. It's not easy. It may sting a little bit, but Jesus gave till it hurt. And I think we need to ask questions. Does he expect anything less from us? And we say, well, you know, the needy, the poor, the down and out, they're facing consequences of their poor choices and bad decisions. Now, I mean, come on, right? If people would just stop doing drugs, if they had just stayed in school, if they had just stopped selling their bodies, this wouldn't be a problem. And we think, you know, hey, I made good choices. That's why I am where I am. So why should I step in and help get them out of circumstances that they caused themselves? We hear that a lot. So let's be super clear here. There are absolutely consequences to bad decisions. But if our compassion is to reflect Jesus' compassion, did he step in and help us when we made bad decisions? That's why Jesus came in the first place, because we couldn't save ourselves. You remember when Jesus fed the 5,000? It said he looked out over the crowd and what? He felt compassion. He felt compassion for them. Did he pick out a group out of that 5,000 and say, well, you know, you guys made bad choices. Why are you here? You guys, you don't deserve it, right? You guys, you're not worthy of this. He fed all those people there. Now, later on, when he went to feed the 4,000, people, you know, Jesus said, you're only here because I fed you before. Did he not feed them then? Did he say, oh, I'm not following for that again? No, he fed them too, right? Because Jesus had compassion? Are we looking at this through the eyes of Jesus? So how does this all play out? In this scenario that we've been talking about in the last 9 weeks, as Jesus is building his church, he said, I'm going to build my church, and as we're kind of building on that foundation, what is it we really need to get out of this? Because there's one more detail in the Good Samaritan story that I want to make sure that we really hone in on as we come to a close. Jesus was talking to a Jewish audience, right? He made the guy beaten up and robbed and left for dead a Jewish guy. He made the hero of the story a Samaritan. So ultimately, what Jesus is doing, he's looking at this Jewish lawyer, this Jewish expert in the law, and he's saying, listen, you were on your way from Jerusalem to Jericho. You were beaten up and robbed and left for dead. So how would you want to be treated by a passerby? Would you be okay with that person going on the other side? Would that satisfy you? Imagine that you're bleeding out. Imagine that you can't stand up. Imagine that you were left half dead. You were left half dead. How would you want to be treated? And so Jesus' simple words at the end of this parable is what? Go and do likewise. In other words, let your compassion reflect Jesus' compassion. You can't do it all. I can't do it all. But we can do something. Maybe you can only help one person. But that's what Jesus would do. So let's just assume that I'm driving home today. All right? And on the way home, I see a car that is wrecked. It's in the ditch. The back of the car is sitting up here. There's smoke coming, And I'm pulling up to there, and I'm thinking, wait a minute. This person has a pro-choice sticker on the back of their car. I ain't helping them. What if they have a sticker on their car that's for a different presidential candidate than what I want? What if there's a sticker on their car that says Black Lives Matter? Am I going to go by on the other side of the road? Would Jesus go by on the other side of the road? I don't think so. I think Jesus would stop and help. That's compassion. That's looking at compassion through the eyes of Jesus. In Mark 9:41, Jesus is talking about that cup of water. And what good is a cup of water going to do for the worldwide water problem? Probably not a whole lot. But if we can fix the whole problem, we say, well then why, I can't fix the whole problem, why mess with it? So here's the lesson. Do what you can. Do it for those in need. And do it because it reflects the compassion of Jesus. And I will tell you, that's the kind of church home that I want to be involved in. That's the kind of place that I want to call home. A place where Jesus' reflection, where Jesus' compassion is a reflection of our compassion.